Okay, we're going to have a look at Thomas Hardy's poem A Wife in London. As you can see, that was written and is set during the Boer War, which was a war that was fought in South Africa, 1899 to 1902. Hardy particularly disapproved of this war. You should also know that Thomas Hardy, who was also a famous novelist as well as a poet, tended to focus on the gloomier aspects of life. He really focuses on those things that people might find a little bit darker. He didn't necessarily celebrate life. To help us understand the poem as well, it's worth knowing that at this time, okay, the Victorians particularly enjoyed artwork that was presented as a kind of tableau, a particular scene with a caption. So, you know, you'd paint a particular scene, the tragedy, the irony. And that's why the poem has got these subheadings. I'll just show you a couple more quickly. Here's one, fidelity. Fidelity means faithfulness. And you can see a young man who is clearly in prison. There's the wall bars up there. We don't know what he's done. He's clearly not very happy. He's got an injury to his arm, but his faithful dog, okay, is still keeping him company. The fidelity of the dog. You've got one here called Waiting, a young woman waiting for somebody to arrive, for something to happen, trying to keep herself busy with her tapestry. You've got a more sentimental one here, Home from Sea, a young child weeping on a grave. He's come back from sea and found that a parent has died. So that sort of is, if you like, the background to this poem, this Victorian love of tableaus with their little captions and subheadings. So to focus in on the poem in a bit more detail then, the thing to notice is the setting here. We've got a woman who is come to meet her husband. She's expecting her husband to come off a ship sailing from South Africa where he has been fighting in the Boer War. She's clearly in London waiting for his return. It's made clear, I think, or it's certainly hinted at, that she has come to London. She's not from London. She is visiting London to meet his ship, to meet him coming in off the ship. But of course, he doesn't return because he's being killed. Hardy really concentrates on the setting here. The tawny vapour. Tawny means like a yellowy brown colour. So the vapour is the fog, the smog, the smoky fog that would have been all over London. And that's probably a symbol of the woman's sort of confusion about what's happening, what's going on. She's in a bit of a fog about precisely when and if her husband's going to come back. The fog's rolling in down the lanes, and if you look the streets around the place she's staying in, they're all very densely packed together like some kind of webby fold on fold. So she's at the centre of a web. It's as if she's caught. If you think about the image of a fly caught in a spider's web, she's trapped. Everything's a bit sort of confusing, not very sort of happy, not very celebrational. This horrible yellowy brown fog rolling in, and even outside the bit of light there is, the street lamp, that's not very bright. The way it glimmers doesn't suggest much brightness. That's maybe symbolising the hope that she's got of her husband coming back, sort of beginning to fade away. A waning taper is like a match that's going out, and you know that sort of fading light probably represents her fading hope. You've got the simile there, haven't you? Then without warning, we've got this messenger's knock cracking smartly. You've got a bit of onomatopoeia there. So sudden knock at the door, and the poet describes, using an adjective here, flashed news. This is some kind of telegram that's arrived. Notice how it just like ends up in her hand. It's in her hand. It's all happened very quickly. The smart crack, the flash news. Before she knows it, it's in her hand. And she's not had a chance to make sense of it. It says, of meaning it dazes to understand. Okay, dazes means it confuses. It doesn't really go in, doesn't sink in. Even though the message is really short, he has fallen in the far south land. Okay, look at the way the language is presented with all the dashes. That's maybe representing the way the telegram is set out, but also the pauses in her understanding as she's reading it slowly, trying to make sense of it. This word here, he has fallen, clearly means that he's died. This is what you might call a euphemism for death, trying to soften it rather than saying he's dead. He has fallen in the far south land. So that's the tragedy. She's come to meet her husband. She's waiting for him in London in this sort of ghastly, miserable, smoggy place of darkness where she feels trapped. And she's got this message that he's died. So we then move on to the third stanza, beg your pardon, the irony. Okay. We don't know what's happened between then and now. It's as if she's still sat there. 'Tis the morrow, the fog hangs thicker. It's as if she's not moved on. She's just waiting, isolated, all on her own. The postman nears and goes. I get from that a very strong feeling of isolation. Even though the postman's come to her, there's not really been any interaction. He's left with her some letter that's arrived, but he doesn't seem to have spoken to her. A letter is brought, whose lines disclosed by the firelight flicker. His hand, whom the worm now knows. So here we've got the information that the man has died, the husband has died. And again, you've got this perhaps very dim light, the firelight flicker. There's no real brightness there. She's trying to make sense of this note. His hand, whom the worm now knows. So you've got there a bit of a metaphor for death. She should be feeling his hand, holding his hand, but the only person that's touching her, the only thing touching his hand is the worm in the grave. Okay, so not a very nice image. I'm just going to jump to another copy here, just because I've got the last bit of the poem in. Okay, look at the description there. Fresh, firm penned in highest feather, page full of his hoped return. That line there, fresh, firm penned in highest feather, okay, is really suggesting that he's got his best writing, he's using the best words he knows. It's, a lovely, exciting letter written presumably not long before he died. A full page of his hoped return. All that excitement, he's soon coming back to her, and of home-planned jaunts by break and burn. So he's talking about the little adventures they're going to have, the days out. Now, break and burn are North Country terms for, streams and rivers and, the natural landscape, little low hills. So there's a suggestion here that maybe they've come from, I don't know, somewhere further north, the borders, from, Cumbria, sort of Carlisle way. She's certainly not a London woman, so she's out of her depth in a strange city. And his letter talks about the summer weather, and then this really sad line, and of the new love that they would learn. So he's talking to her about getting to know her. Now, that would suggest to me that they are newly married. Possibly they've got married just before he sailed for South Africa to fight. And the terrible irony, of course, is that she gets this lovely, exciting letter full of hope and promises of love and excitement and happiness together. The day after, she's received a letter saying that he's returned, he's fallen in the far south land. So she already knows he's dead. yet she's reading the letter that he's written her, talking about the excitement. And that sort of rather grim idea is very much in keeping with Thomas Hardy's interest. He liked that sort of gloomy, slightly quirky take on life, that, you know, you would get a letter from your loved one the day after you'd been told that they had died.